word to wise. Grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we are going to be talking about the Eternals, the very same Eternals that we'll be seeing in theaters in Marvel's The Eternals this November 5th. And I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this team to hold an intelligent conversation about them and more right now. But first, if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button because I post new videos throughout the week and live stream every Saturday. Also, if you enjoy the video, I humbly ask that you Hulk smash that like button because it really helps the channel out. That said, let's ponder the question, who are the Eternals? The Eternals first appeared in Eternals #1 in 1976 and were created by the legend Jack Kirby. The Eternals are god-like beings created 1 million years ago by the Celestials, a species of colossal space titans who possess near unimaginable cosmic power, who are considered to be the gods of the Marvel Universe as we know it, and these creations of the Celestials were born to preserve and watch over the Earth. This was due to the Celestials' curiosity with Homo erectus and the possibilities their DNA possessed, appearing no different than modern-day humans, but possessing power beyond that of any normal human, and even beyond that of human mutates and metahumans. This is due to them being powered by cosmic energy. This is essentially what makes up their life force, and this power is so potent that it gives all Eternals total mental control over their physical forms and even their bodily processes, regardless of whether they are awake or asleep. Even beyond this, all Eternals possess the ability to manipulate and transmute organic and inorganic matter. Some are better at this than others, and beyond that, all Eternals possess telepathy and telekinesis, and even more than that, all Eternals possess the ability to use their telekinesis and psionic powers to generate force fields. All Eternals possess an average level of strength, agility, durability, stamina, reflexes, and speed that is considered to be superhuman. Their strength in particular being enough to lift at least 15 tons without struggle. Some can even average 25 tons, though some tend to use telekinesis to increase their strength to this level. Their levels of durability and stamina allow them to engage in physical tasks that would otherwise be taxing for a normal human being, some of which can even go for hours or even days without rest. Their speed, reflexes, and agility are so potent that typically, unless they're caught off guard, it's very rare that any one of them actually gets hit by anything. Even when an Eternal can be harmed, they still possess regenerative healing factors that allow them to recover from injuries that no normal human would be able to recover from. All Eternals, when created, despite having access to a wide array of cosmic abilities, often tend to choose one particular aspect of the power cosmic and focus on it. Beyond that, all Eternals have the ability to join in what is called the Unimind, a force created by one of the original Eternals, Kronos, when he attempted to isolate the Eternals' cosmic energies, but this resulted in a disastrous explosion that killed all of the original Eternals, but transformed Kronos into a being of pure cosmic energy. This ability would later become something all later Eternals could replicate. The Unimind is a concentration of the energy that fuels all Eternals and their abilities that is created when Eternals merge together as one, creating a cosmic entity without race or gender and made of light, mind, and pure energy. Not only is this being capable of raw cosmic power, but possesses the sum total of all the Eternals' will and intelligence who join within it. Even humans and other sentient beings can merge with the Unimind, eternal or not. That said, their claim to fame has always been their immortality. Initially, the Eternals were only meant to be long-lived, possessing the longevity necessary to live for centuries on end, but this was later retconned to them them being functionally immortal. They cannot die from old age, toxins, or even disease. They can, however, die in other ways. The most surefire way is to scatter their atoms across a wide area. But thanks to the machine, a system that not only acts as a reservoir of information and acts as transportation for the Eternals, but it also acts as a way for Eternals to be resurrected when they die. Any Eternal who dies can be brought back to life. It has even been revealed as recently as Kieran Gillen's now current run on the Eternals that the machine can also alter an Eternal's appearance and gender, if the Eternal prefers. Sometimes this can even be done against the Eternal's wishes. According to Icarus in Eternals Volume 5, Number 1, this is something that tends to happen every 20 or 25,000 years. Speaking of death and rebirth, during Gillen's run on the Eternals, we learned exactly what allows the machine to resurrect Eternals, explaining how it rebirths an Eternal from their death, and it was a revelation that shook the group to its core. They learned that in order to be reborn, a human must die. The human selected is random, and the implications of this are unknown beyond the passing of the human up to this point. That said, it has led to the Eternals reconsidering their relationship with humanity, and even more curiously, the Deviants. Earlier, I mentioned that Eternals cannot be killed by disease, but they can suffer from it, namely that of the Deviant Syndrome, an affliction that is considered a mutation. Eternals can also suffer from what is called Eternal Madness, another affliction that occurs when Eternals live for too long. This is due to the Eternals being long-lived superhumans, but still having the mind of a human being. This is basically the Eternals' version of old age senility. It takes centuries for this to occur, but in the case of the Eternal Cersei, it only took her a matter of months. Eventually, the Eternal goes mad, and the only cure is to kill the Eternal and revive them via the machine. Eternals supposedly have really low birth rates, meaning they are highly unlikely to bear children, and even when they do, that child is born a normal human. Despite this, the Eternal Athena does happen to have a son named Joey Athena, who, despite being born normal, did later gain eternal qualities. She's also had two other children with the deviant Crow, who will be appearing in the MCU film Eternals, children by the name of Deborah and Donald Ritter. Eternals are not only found on Earth, but even on other famous planets in the Marvel Comics universe, namely Skrullos, the Skrull homeworld if you couldn't have guessed, as well as Hala, the Kree homeworld. The Eternals of Earth tend to only involve themselves in matters where deviants are involved, creatures born of the Celestials tampering with human genes that went terribly wrong. Deviants, for the most part, are born with humanoid qualities and even some powers that make them superhuman. They are often deformed and are considered to be the reason tales of trolls and ogres exist in fairy tales to this very day. The Celestials' disdain for deviants seem to originally be predicated on their tendency towards evil, but we have learned in later years that it is more likely due to their capacity for change. And this flies in the face of the order that the Celestials so covet. The Celestials charge the Eternals with monitoring and intervening whenever deviants caused any trouble on Earth, hence why you rarely, if ever, saw Eternals appear in any major crossover stories in Marvel Comics. Typically, if and when they did show up, it was rarely ever something they entirely engaged in. That said, the Eternals have 3 rules they must always follow: to protect the Celestials, their creators, to protect the machine, which resurrects the Eternals and is the repository of all knowledge and power for them, and last but not least, correct excess deviation. These rules were later realized to be misleading. The Eternals one day learned the true purpose of why they were meant to protect the Earth. It wasn't just to correct deviation, but to preserve and cultivate the humans of Earth due to the Celestials realizing that long ago, a powerful threat known as the Horde would one day emerge and try to destroy every living thing on the planet. This was all thanks to another Celestial, one known as the Progenitor and an Alpha Celestial at that, who died 4 billion years ago and just so happened to crash on Earth, where he eventually died. The sickness that killed the Progenitor was the Horde, who had infested his body. Realizing this, the Celestials knew humanity, if left to evolve, would one day mutate into, quotey fingers, powerful antibodies that could fight back against the Horde. Those antibodies would become the heroes of the Marvel Universe that we know today. Supposedly, Loki seems to be of the belief that every weird and crazy thing that's ever happened on Earth, including the rise of superhumans, is due to the progenitors' infested blood seeping into the Earth and mutating humanity over time. I bring all this up because this information was directly responsible for causing the Eternals to either turn on one another, killing each other until no Eternal was left, or they committed mass suicide. And this was all during Jason Aaron's Avengers run, learning that their purpose was not what they originally were told, but that it was simply to wet nurse humanity until they could end a threat caused by a Celestial in the first place. It all seemingly drove them mad. To some, it seemed like melodrama, but in reality, it was because the Eternals over time grew to love humanity. To learn they were simply there to cultivate them made them realize that the people they loved were merely tools. And worse yet, the Eternals were tools just the same. The Eternals would be removed from the board of the Marvel Comics universe, with this occurrence only returning in 2021 thanks to the upcoming release of the MCU's Eternals film and Kieran Gillen beginning his turn at the helm of writing their stories the same year. One key thing most people will probably recognize about the Eternals is that they seem to bear a striking resemblance to Jack Kirby's New Gods. Well, this is not entirely unintentional. You see, back in 1970, Jack Kirby had departed from Marvel Comics to go work at DC Comics, where he created the New Gods, a series that by today's standards seems incredibly obscure, but is considered a cult classic series with tons of characters who have left a lasting impact on the DC Comics universe as a whole. Jack Kirby departed from DC Comics without ever actually completing his New Gods storyline. However, when he went back to Marvel, he created the Eternals, a series that Marvel went out of its way to try and market as if it was in some way, shape, form, or fashion connected to the New Gods. Oddly enough, this series was in some ways a spiritual successor to the New Gods, and much like the New Gods, Jack Kirby never got to finish his original run on the series. Another thing you may notice about some of the different characters in the Eternals, namely characters like Gilgamesh, Ajax, Athena, Phastos, Makari, Zurus, Circe. You may notice that these characters bear names very similar to significant figures across different mythologies. That is by design, because the Eternals, being so deeply rooted in the Earth's history, their presence on Earth often had people revere them as if they were gods. It was kind of a way to explain all the mythologies of the Earth within the Marvel Comics universe, even though later on, because there were the Asgardian gods as well as the Olympian gods in Marvel Comics, we would later learn that the Eternals would form an alliance with these characters and even act as their proxies on Earth. Also, another little known factoid about the Eternals is that the character Thanos is connected to them, though many people don't realize how, and that is because of the character Star Fox, aka Eros. Eros is a character who, as you may have imagined, is derivative of the Eros of Greek mythology. This character is also the brother of Thanos, both of them being the sons of the Eternal Alars and the Titan Suisan. And this, by proxy, makes Thanos an Eternal. However, Thanos is considered to be a deviant. There are too many Eternals to focus on in just this video alone. Their numbers range upwards of over 20 different characters, but I will make separate videos talking a bit about the ones we know will appear in the upcoming film, as well as some I think are important enough to discuss due to connections to other more prominent Marvel characters. That said, I'm not going to do what I normally do in these videos, where I typically like to cast characters, or whatever, a fan casting, all that other stuff, because we have a movie coming out. It's already been done, so we're not going to go there. However, I am going to give you some recommended reading. First and foremost, I'm going to recommend that you check out Where It All Started with Eternals number 1 through 19, the original series created by Jack Kirby. I also recommend you check out the Eternals saga, which oddly enough does not take place within the pages of any Eternals comics. It actually takes place within the pages of Thor number 283 up to 301, plus the Thor annual number 7. I also am going to recommend that you check out Avengers number 352 through 354, which is the Fear the Reaper arc that focuses on the characters Cersei and the Black Knight's time as Avengers. This is an arc that I could easily see appear in the MCU. I also recommend you check out Neil Gaiman's 2006 Eternals series, which is Eternals number 1 through 7. And in this story, this is one where the Eternals no longer remember their true selves and are living their lives as normal humans and all the shenanigans that can entail. I also recommend that you check out the follow-up series by Charles and Daniel Knopf, Eternals number 1 through 9, where the Eternals have regained their memories and the aftermath of it ensues as Celestials descend upon the Earth and the Eternals are more fractured than ever. And yet again, another story I could easily see be developed in the MCU. Last and most certainly not least, I recommend you check out Kieran Gillen's current run on Eternals, which by the time of this recording, we have gotten to Eternals number 1 through 6 with a couple of one-shots thrown in there here and there with Eternals Thanos Rising and Eternals Celestia chief among them. And so far, this series seems to mirror a lot of things we've already seen in the MCU's Eternals trailers. All that said, the Eternals is a group of characters who, I'm not gonna lie, I never really particularly cared about. The comics I was never really terribly into, and what little bit of knowledge I had about them prior to the announcement of their MCU movie, I could barely fill a thimble with. But when Kieran Gillen took over as the writer of the Eternals, and of course seeing the trailers for the upcoming movies, it sparked my interest, and I actually have gone back and read, some of these very same stories I've literally just told you about, in the recommended reads section of this video, and I gotta admit, I've actually become a fan of the Eternals. Not everything about them, but I have come to find some favorite characters that I enjoy among them. They're interesting and they have a lot going on in a deeper narrative that I never realized when I was a kid reading these comics, which is, no big surprise. As children, we tend to miss a lot of the nuance within comics when we're children. That said, I really enjoy these characters and I highly suggest you check them out. I will do a separate video, as I said earlier, for some of the characters that we know will be seen in the Eternals movie, as well as some that I think are important enough that warrant a discussion, because they will very likely wind up in the MCU very soon as well, or in some cases, some are already there. If you enjoyed this video, Hulk smash that like button and make sure to share it all over the internet and with all your friends so they'll know how you leveled up your comic book big brain in regards to the Marvel Comics heroes, the Eternals. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know what you thought about the Eternals. Have you always known about them, or are you today years old finding out about them? Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.